The sky over the city was the color of boiled milk, thick and threatening rain, the morning my husband accidentally left a folder open on our dining table. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had my ceramics class on Tuesdays back then, and because my hands still smelled faintly of clay when I touched the papers. I was 24, newly married, and very much still learning how to carry another person's name beside mine without it scraping the skin. I had fallen in love with Armin for reasons both silly and stubborn: his strange, encyclopedic recall of cricket stats, the careful way he folded dumplings with his mother, his laugh, which began like an apology and ended in a burst. He was 31 and already had the crisp presence of a man who walked into rooms knowing where the windows were. The folder stayed when he left for work, as if it belonged to the table. The first page was a cover letter, the greeting neat as a bow: "Dear Ms. Sultana. Our mutual client, Mr. Armin Hassan, has requested the following documents be prepared for signature." My eyes drifted lower. Quitclaim deed for 17 Qazi Lane, transferring title to sole ownership by Mr. Hassan, power of attorney for banking and real estate transactions, amendment to add Mr. Hassan as primary on life insurance policy. I had to sit down. The chair's wood was warm, it creaked like it was trying to advise me. My grandmother's house at 17 Qazi Lane had come to me right after graduation, a single-story place with a mango tree that dropped fruit like it was tipping a basket in slow motion. I kept flowers on the windowsill and bowls of water for stray cats. My grandmother's sari still hung in the closet like a person waiting to be asked a question. We had moved in after the wedding because it made sense. Put money into renovations instead of rent, Armin had said, and at the time, that advice sounded kind and practical, the way someone takes your elbow at a crowded crossing. The folder had dates. There was a notary appointment on Friday. There were instructions in the brisk, bullet point language of decisions made before you're consulted. There was my name, but only in the places where consent was a line at the bottom. A person can be in love and still feel their blood turn to ice. It's a curious sensation, cold, but clarifying. I put the papers back exactly as I'd found them. I wiped my clay-scented hands on a towel. I sat for a long time, listening to the ceiling fan churn a dull halo. At noon, I carried myself to the little cafe 2 streets over and ordered tea I didn't drink. I texted Perry, who had been my roommate before I'd become a wife. "Are you free?" I wrote. "I need to talk." She arrived 20 minutes later, braids swinging like a pendulum. Perry's face had a way of making you tell the truth. Maybe it was the kindness in her eyes, or how she didn't rush silences. I showed her the photo I'd snapped of the first page. Perry set the phone down gently as if it were a match about to catch. "Did you two talk about any of this?" she asked. "Not directly," I said. "He mentioned something about refinancing to lower payments. He said it'd be easier if everything was in one name, his credit, you know. He framed it like a favor he was doing me." Perry arched an eyebrow. "Convenient. What about the power of attorney?" "He said it was in case something happened to me," I said, and somewhere under my ribs, something laughed bitterly. Perry took my hand. "Mina, you don't have to sign anything you don't understand." "I know," I said. "But he set up the appointment. He expects me to go." "Then cancel," she said, like it was that simple. I stared at the condensation on my glass. "Cancel, and then what?" We shared bills, a bed, a life with cutlery he had chosen because it looked expensive and I had tolerated because it did. He drove our car because he liked to be at the wheel. He handled our taxes because he said filing was tedious and he didn't mind spreadsheets. He had enrolled us in a joint mobile plan and moved most of my mail to digital. Lately, he'd taken to calling the house our asset when we argued about small things, like the time I wanted to turn the second bedroom into a studio for ceramics, and he wanted a home office. "We'll get a second property someday," he'd said. "We need to think like adults." I'd smiled and nodded, as if those were not two different languages. "Don't sign," Perry said again, slower. "What if he's just trying to be efficient?" I asked, like a coward. "What if he's not?" she said. That night, I stirred curry on the stove while Armin told me about his day, how an old friend had called, how the new intern poured too much milk in the office tea. He was funny. He kissed my forehead for no reason. The folder was no longer on the table, it had vanished, like the dangerous thing you know exists because you saw it but cannot prove because you were the only one in the room. After dinner, when I went to wash the plates, he came up behind me and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Don't forget Friday," he said lightly. "We'll grab lunch after the notary, there's that place with the amazing fish kebabs." His breath was warm against my ear. "What are we signing?" I asked, going for casual and missing. He didn't blink. "Just a few housekeeping things," he said. "Standard. It will make so many things easier." "Like the house," I said. He smiled and kissed my neck. "Especially the house," he said. I dried my hands. "Whose name will be on it?" "Mine," he said, as if that were obvious. "On paper, but ours in every way that matters." "Mine, on paper," I repeated. "But ours in every way that matters." "Mina," he said, laughing a little. "You're so romantic about documents." "Documents are where people get less romantic," I said. He pinched my waist. "You trust me, don't you?" I turned. He looked so sure. He looked like I had, once, before mornings began with folders. "Do you trust me?" I asked him back. "Of course," he said immediately. "More than anyone." It is possible for two people to say the word trust and mean the opposite things. I didn't sleep that night. The worries assembled in the dark like furniture, rigid shapes I kept bumping into. When Armin snored softly beside me, I slid out of bed and went to the second bedroom that was partly office and partly the studio I'd built by claiming territory inch by inch. The old desk lamp made a yellow little moon on my notebook. I wrote down everything I knew. The deed to 17 Causey Lane was in my name, transferred at the land office in the monsoon the summer I graduated. I remembered the smell of damp files, the rows of iron cabinets, the clerk with an ink pad on a ceramic saucer. I remembered my grandmother's hand on my shoulder, her voice joyous but firm. "The house is yours. Keep it well." I wrote down everything I suspected. Armin wanted the house in his name to use as collateral. I didn't know whether this was for ambition or emergency. He had debts. He had plans. He had an ego that liked the feeling of sole ownership. Or maybe he simply believed that the universe intended him to be the one who held the papers and the keys. I wrote down what I wanted: safety. Not a divorce, not a fight, not the theater of a dramatic betrayal. I wanted to live in my grandmother's house without fear. I wanted to trust the person in my bed with more than my recipes. Then I wrote down what I would do. The words scorched and cooled even as I put them on the page. I would go to the land office. I would ask whether I could move the house into a trust. Government offices are their own seasons. The land office had the long, rattling fans and the smell of old ink, the slow shuffle of feet bound by routine. I wore a plain kurta and tied my hair up and kept my voice polite. The clerk behind the glass window looked at my ID as if it might tell him something about tiredness. "I want to know," I said, "about placing a property into a trust, so that it's managed by me but not easily transferred without my permission." He rubbed a stamp against the pad and looked up. Are you the owner? Yes, I said. Any mortgage? No. He shrugged one shoulder. It can be done. There are forms. You will need a deed of trust or a deed to a trust. A lawyer can draft it. You must file it with us. My heart jumped like a fish catching light. How long does filing take? He lifted his chin toward a bulletin board. Filing we can do in a day. Paperwork depends on you. Why so urgent? I need to make sure the person who says he loves me cannot take my house away from my future self, I did not say. I smiled. Schedules, I said vaguely. Thank you. Outside, the sun was bright enough to be a rebuke. I called Perry. Come with me to a lawyer? I asked. Text me the address, she said without questions. We found a small office with a brown wooden desk that had probably seen every kind of family crisis you can have in a city. The lawyer's name was on a brass plate, Fatima Sultana. There it was again, as if the letter I had seen at home had predicted me. But when she walked out to meet us, she had sharp eyes and a soft scarf and no relation to the stranger who had typed template forms for my husband. I told her everything, not because I was brave but because I was running out of air. You can set up a living trust, Fatima said thoughtfully when I was done. You remain the trustee. You can designate a successor trustee in case something happens to you, but until then, you are the only one who controls it. You can put your house into it. No one can sell or transfer the property without the trustee's consent, and you control the trustee. I felt something in my chest loosen. Will my husband be notified? Not unless he's a beneficiary, she said, and cocked her head. Is he? No, I said, it came out like a vow. You will need to bring your original title documents, Fatima continued. We draft the trust, then a deed transferring the house to the trust. You will sign it here. We'll take it to the land office for recording. There is a fee. I can pay the fee, I whispered. Fatima looked at me a long second, as if calibrating. Then she said, Mina, I want you to consider whether you feel safe. Safe, I repeated, and the word tasted thin. If you believe there will be anger, have a plan for where to go, she said. Be prepared. I have a plan, I said. I have Perry. Perry squeezed my arm. She has me, she said, and I breathed like maybe I had lungs again. Everything after that moved with the speed of fear. That same afternoon, we drafted the trust. I named it after my grandmother's mango tree, the Omgak Living Trust, because I wanted the name to taste like something sweet. I was the trustee. Perry was my successor trustee. I signed with a pen that worked. I bought a small lockbox for the document because the gesture felt like both ritual and armor. At dawn the next day, I went to my grandmother's old steel cabinet, the one with the dent on the second drawer where she had once said a mouse had tried to chew its way to the monsoon, and found the title to the house. My grandmother's handwriting, careful and slanted, ran beside my name like a blessing. Fatima drafted the deed transferring the property to the trust. At her office, I signed. She stamped. She sent her assistant to the land office while I sat still and thought of mango leaves clapping in wind. The assistant returned with a thin smile and a receipt of recording. It was done. Keep this safe, Fatima said, handing me the copy. And Mina, whatever else happens, know that you made a lawful, reasonable decision to protect yourself. I walked outside into a day that looked ordinary but wasn't. I could smell something like thunder. I checked my phone, one message from Armin asking whether I wanted biryani for dinner. The messages you receive on days you fundamentally change your life are often about dinner. He didn't notice for 2 days. On the third day, he found the notary's rescheduled email and then the absence of my confirmation and then the truth. It was a Sunday. The sky was bright as if it had forgotten we were people with shadows. "Why did you go behind my back?" he asked, holding his phone like it could protect him from the softness of the couch. "I was washing cups in the sink. I set them down." "I didn't go behind your back," I said. "You left a folder in front of my face." "You misunderstood," he said, and it came quick. "I was trying to consolidate. It's easier if one person manages. That's what adults do." "It's easier for the person who's hidden behind the word one," I said. His mouth flattened. "You always make things about poetry, Mina. And you always make them about control," I said, surprising myself with how plain it sounded. He laughed, hard and without humor. "Control? You think I'm trying to control you? I work 45 hours a week, that's control. I pay the electricity bill, that's control. I set up a meeting to do what everyone does when they get married, and you, what, you scramble off to a lawyer like a thief." "I went to a lawyer like a person," I said. "The house is in a trust. I am the trustee. It's safer this way. For me." "And what about me?" he demanded. "You still live here," I said. "You still eat here. You still lay your head here. You just don't own it. The way I didn't own your office chair or your watch or your need to say my name more softly when you want something." He looked at me then in a way that made the room tilt. I had always thought he had two moods, tender and efficient. I was wrong, there was a third, and it was called offended. "You made me look stupid," he said. "Do you understand that? My lawyer is expecting signatures." "Your lawyer?" I asked. "The one whose letter asked me to give away the only thing my grandmother left me as if I were consenting to a haircut?" "That lawyer?" "You're being dramatic," he said. "I wouldn't have taken it away." "You would have had the paper that said you could," I said. "One day, you would have used it to do something that seemed expedient. I would have learned then what my signature had meant all along." He started pacing. "This is ridiculous," he said. "This is, frankly, ridiculous. I thought we believed in each other." "I believe in myself," I said, and the words rose like heat. Something flashed across his face. He softened it, quick. He sat on the edge of the table where the folder had once been, and he reached for my hand. "Mina," he said, and now his voice leaned toward apology, that old way it began. "You're overreacting. I should have explained more. I should have involved you. I am sorry. We will add my name later, when you're comfortable, and the house will be ours, okay?" "Why did you want your name alone?" I asked. "Not ours. Yours." He looked at me. Hesitated. "Not long. Just enough. Because it's cleaner," he said. "Less complicated." I nodded. "Less complicated for you." He pulled his hand back. "Is this because your friends put doubts in your head? Perry? She never liked me. She liked the version of you who liked me more than he liked being in charge," I said. He stood. The apology left his face like someone had wiped it. "I don't have time for this," he said. "I have a presentation to finish. When you're ready to talk like adults, let me know." He left the room. I stood at the sink and watched 2 drops of water walk down a cup and disappear where I couldn't see. After that, the house became a territory with borders. We tried for normal. We failed and called it normal anyway. He took long, tense phone calls on the balcony that lasted too long to be about presentations. He asked me to send him my pay stubs and I told him I would not do that anymore. He changed the passwords to things I didn't use. He stopped buying mangoes from the woman at the corner and picked a different vendor out of principle. It was petty and loud and also quiet as drought. One evening, he knocked on the door of the second bedroom and stood watching me pull a vase out of the kiln. The vase was the color of unfired clay at the lip because the glaze had run. It looked like someone had bitten it. "Your ceramics are good," he said, as if passing a verdict. "Maybe you can sell them." "Maybe," I said. He looked at the vase. "It would be easier to set up an online shop if we formed a company," he said. "I could manage the finances." "I don't need a manager," I said. He snorted, turned to go, and then turned back. "You really think you did something clever," he said. "With the trust." "I think I did something necessary," I said. He leaned against the doorframe. "What if I asked you to add me as co-trustee?" "I would say no," I said. "What if I left?" he said. "That would be your decision," I said, and my voice shook though I willed it steady. "I love you. But I don't love the version of you who wants to own me." We lived like that for 4 weeks. It was a long time to be half married. The day it broke was the day my grandmother's sari fell from its hanger and lay on the closet floor like a person who had fainted. I was the one who found it, a green and gold silk wrapped in old tissue paper that had long since given up keeping time. I knelt and gathered it and sat on the floor and cried for 5 minutes, startling myself with how quiet and intense the crying was, like rain out of the sun. When I looked up, Armin was in the doorway, watching. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "Everything." He leaned against the jamb like a child who had been told to act grown. "You can't keep using your grandmother to make me feel bad," he said. "It's manipulative." I folded the sari so carefully it felt like an oath. "I'm not making you feel anything," I said. "I am feeling." He watched me a moment. "I need to be honest," he said, and the words were exactly the ones I thought I wanted. "I have an opportunity," he said. "A friend and I are launching a small import business. To do it properly, we need capital. If I had had the house in my name, I could have arranged a loan." I said nothing. The house was a mango tree. He was telling me he saw it as a ladder. "I didn't want to worry you," he went on. "I know how you get nervous." He said, "This is for us, Mina." "For us," I repeated. "And if it fails?" "It won't," he said automatically, and then, as if he wanted to fill the silence with noise, "but even if it does, there are ways to." "To what?" I asked softly. "To lose less? To lose what is mine before we begin to lose anything else." He shook his head with disdain wrapped around it like a scarf. "You're impossible." "And you're hypothetical," I said. "I am standing in front of an actual thing. A house. A sari. A promise that was made to me. I cannot sacrifice it to your projections." He stared at me so long I thought time had been scolded into stillness. Then he said, "I can't live with someone who doesn't believe in me." I looked down at the sari. When I looked back up, I said, "Clearly, I believe in the version of you who would not ask me to swallow my own inheritance and call it vitamins." He left that night. He packed a bag with angry zippers and said he would be at his brother's. He took the blue sweater I had bought him and the watch he loved. He did not take the photograph on the shelf of us at the seaside, faces burnt red by laughter and sun. It stayed, its edges curling, the proof of another life. Perry came over with kulfi and the willingness to sit in silence. We watched a terrible show with people in beautiful kitchens pretending to fight over herbs. I fell asleep with my head on her shoulder like I had in college, and for a moment I was 20 and the future was a set of doors labeled with chalk instead of engraved with steel. In the morning, I made tea and stood near the window. The mango tree in the lane showed me new leaves. The house was quiet in a way that was not loneliness but breath. 2 days later, Armin came with a different tone. Contrite, with rain on his shoulders. He had a bouquet of lilies because he thought lilies were the kind of apology you could hold. He said, "I'm sorry," and I said, "For which part?" "For not explaining." "For making you feel small," he said. He had always been good at choosing two true things to hide the third. "I don't feel small," I said. "Not anymore." He looked around the room, as if assessing real estate instead of history. "I want us to work," he said. "I love you." "I love you," I said truthfully and calmly and without an agenda at the bottom. He waited, as if that were a place to step. When I didn't add the thing he wanted, he said, "So you'll add me to the trust?" "No," I said gently. His face tightened. "You're being unreasonable," he said. "I am being very reasonable," I said. "You asked to be the only name on the house. You planned it without telling me. When I took control of my own paperwork, you called me dramatic. You want access to my collateral for your dream. You want me to treat your desire as our necessity. I am not refusing to join your life. I am declining to be dissolved into it." He stared at me. It was the stare of a man who had always assumed love meant a kind of softness that could be molded into what he needed it to be. He set the lilies on the table, as if their beauty could carry weight like beams. "I suppose this is it," he said. "It can be a pause," I said. "A season. You can do your business without my house. You can show me that what you want is not always the most important thing. You can come back to the table with partnership instead of paper." He shook his head, a small motion that told me something had solidified. "I won't be tested," he said, and that was that. He left again. This time, he took the photograph. He left the frame. There is no singular time that endings arrive, they seep, then settle. Months unfolded, each with its own small bravery. I learned to check the locks because the world was still the world. I started selling my vases at a little Saturday market. An old woman in a yellow sari bought the one with the bitten lip and said, "It looks like it forgot to be perfect," and I didn't know a review could make me cry. I painted Paris nails in our kitchen and we read out loud when her eyes got tired. I changed the curtains because the ones we had chosen together looked like a mistake I couldn't wash. Armin called sometimes. Mostly for practical things, documents, timing. Once at 2 a.m., he called and didn't speak, as if waiting to see if the warmth of a voice could be borrowed. We met a few weeks later to sign papers neither of us loved. We did it in a small office with a polite woman who said her name 3 times before it stuck. We divided what could be divided in a life as young as ours, which turned out to be mostly crockery and excuse. He looked thinner. I had cut my hair. We sat there like travelers moving from one terminal to another, clutching the handles of our remorse. "I wish you had trusted me," he said softly, without the old superiority. "I wish I had never needed to choose between love and safety," I said, and that was the truest sentence I had ever offered. Outside, the city went on. A boy ran past with a kite, a dog chased a shadow, a woman in green crossed the street without looking because she had done it 1,000 times and faith is a habit. When I got home, I took the copy of the trust papers out of the lockbox and held them for a second. They were heavy, and not because of the paper. I thought of my grandmother's hands, the ones that had always smelled faintly of cloves. I thought of the mango tree, which would bear fruit because that was its job, not because I deserved it. The house changed once I was its only heartbeat. It grew rooms where there had been corners. I peeled back a patch of damp paint in the kitchen and found old plaster and then older plaster, and beneath that a penciled signature, 1972, my grandmother's eldest brother had written his name there when he had repaired the wall after a storm. I traced it with my finger, and my finger came away with a little dust and a little history. It felt like being sung to. I used the second bedroom for my studio fully now. I set a wheel by the window and listened to the street hawkers call mango, guava, jackfruit in a rhythm that made sense to feet. I took tea to the roof in the evenings. I learned the names of the stars because my grandmother had known them like neighbors, and I wanted to have that kind of friendship with the sky. I wore her green sari on a festival day, and it felt like wearing armor made of silk. Sometimes, late, I remembered how Armin had helped me move a heavy bookshelf up the stairs, both of us sweating and laughing, cursing and loving with the same breath. Memory is not loyal, it offers you sweetness and bitterness in the same spoon. You can swallow both and still keep your teeth. It was Perry who said, offhand one morning while we were trimming bowls, "You know, you could start a little workshop here." Teach. Teach? I said, like it was a new verb. She shrugged. You're good, Mina. People will come. People want to make things with their hands to remember their hands are theirs. It sounded both terrifying and exactly right. I scrawled a flyer and put it on the community board by the tea stall. The first Saturday, 3 women came, a mother who had wept while her son napped in a basket, a schoolteacher who rolled coils with the same patience she used with chalk, a young artist with blue streaks in her hair who said she had tried everything but clay once and would like to correct that error. We sat in a circle and made bowls and wiped our palms on wet cloths and told the kind of truths that are only possible when your fingers are busy smoothing the lip of something fragile you made yourself. I did not think of Armin for an hour, and when I did, he was a person far away in a different weather. On the first night of monsoon, the rain came with conviction. The mango tree slapped its hands together. I stood in the doorway and watched water pour from the sky in a curtain that looked like forgiveness. I made a little altar with a candle, a silly thing, until it wasn't, and said aloud, I am here. Not I am fine. Not I am right. Simply, I am here. I received a message from an unknown number that night, a simple line, hope you're okay. It could have been Armin. It could have been spam. I turned off my phone and listened to the house, to its old bones creak and settle, to its rooms proceed with the business of being shelter, which they had been doing before me and would likely do after. I dreamt of my grandmother. She was washing mangoes in the sink, her back to me, singing a song I didn't know but had always felt the shape of. She turned and smiled and said, as if we had been in the middle of a conversation, the thing about doors, Mina, is that they're supposed to open both ways. I woke laughing. It was morning. The rain had made everything clean and complicated, the way rain does. I wrote the line in my notebook and then, below it, another, the thing about love is that it should not require a deed to make you stay. A year later, I held a small exhibition of my ceramics in the front room. We propped open the door and strung fairy lights along a string that used to hold my grandmother's saris, sun setting in silk. People walked in with wet umbrellas and curiosity. Sushi, the cat from the alley, lounged across a plinth like a critic. I had titled the pieces with names that felt like small stories, Mango Shadow, Rain Lip, Trust Deed. I priced them modestly and watched as people selected objects, held them to the light, made little noises of approval. Near the window, I had placed a single vase on a reed mat. It was tall and matte and slightly crooked, the kind of crooked that makes you tilt your head and smile. I had carved along its side a line from my notebook, I am here. An older gentleman in a neat kurta stood looking at it for a long time. Finally, he turned to me. My wife would have loved this, he said. Would? I asked gently. Would, he affirmed, and his smile was both a grief and a gift. She taught English. She used to circle sentences she loved in her novels and say, this one. This is where I live. He gestured to the vase. I think she would have lived here. I pressed my hand to my heart. Then it's yours, I said impulsively. He blinked. No, no. I'll pay. You can pay me in a story, I said. Tell me how you met. He laughed. Then he obliged, and we stood by the mango window and listened to love recount itself without ownership. Later, after people left, Perry and I ate leftover samosas on the floor and counted the day's earnings, which were enough to embarrass me with joy. The house felt like it had been the host it had always wanted to be. On the step, there was a bouquet of lilies. I looked at them a long time. Then I picked them up, carried them inside, cut the stems and put them in a tall glass, and placed them on the dining table where the folder had been, where the lilies looked like what they were, flowers. They were beautiful and foolish and unnecessary. They perfumed the room. They would wither, and then I would throw them away, and the vase would remain. I went to the second bedroom, which had become my studio without apology, and turned off the lamp above the wheel. The room was messy with making, clay streaks on the floor, bowls with their tongues out. I slept well that night. When I dreamed, my grandmother was mending a tear in a sari and humming, and the needle moved cleanly through silk. Each stitch was a tiny insistence that the world could be made to hold together, not because it was solid, but because someone loved it enough to keep trying. Sometimes, when I told the story, because people like stories with sharp titles, I started it the way the day had started. The sky looked like boiled milk, and I was 24. My husband tried to put everything in his name, but I switched the deed before he noticed. It sounded like the beginning of a thriller, but it was the middle of something else. It was the moment I understood that the paper you sign is part of the story you live, that you can be a young woman and refuse to be negotiated out of your life. It was an ending and a beginning, and the house, in all its ordinary rooms, knew how to be both. The end.